Okay, good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, members of the public. I don't think there's any press here. It's our first planning committee, indeed, the first planning committee of the new council. So every year, it's my moment in the sun, my moment of power. So I'm going to ask, please, the first item on the agenda is the election of the chairman. And can I please ask members if there are any nominations for chairman?
Thank you very much. Could I please nominate Councillor Ruth Edwards?
Seconded.
Can I ask members then, just for the matter of record, to vote to make Councillor Ruth Edwards your chairman of the planning committee for the new year? Fantastic. Okay. Councillor Edwards, congratulations. If you'd like to join me, please.
Right, good afternoon everyone. Thank you very much indeed for looking forward now again to another year as your chairman, and I'm sure you're going to support me as you always do so well in the past, and I do appreciate that wholeheartedly. And we have also got some new members this time, so I'm sure they'll enjoy it and learn as they go along the way. And everybody does help one another, although I do hope you make sure that you're very, very good as usual on your attendance. So I would now look for a nomination for my vice chair, please. Councillor Murphy.
Councillor Peter Clark.
Any other nominations for vice chair? Show of hands of approval then, please, committee. Right, thank you very much indeed. So if Councillor Clark wishes to join me up here.
Madam Chairman, because we've got a delegates panel, which is usually consists of the chair, vice chair, and the opposition spokesperson. Can we nominate someone for the opposition spokesperson here and now, please?
Is that all right with tradition, Rob?
Yeah.
Yes, can do. Would you like to nominate?
I nominate Councillor Roger Harris.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you. Show of hands for the opposition spokesperson. Right, okay, right, thank you very much indeed. As most members will be aware, that we do use the delegated panel for meetings with the public, the applicants and those who are opposing it, and we go out and visit those in between committees. Right, thank you. I hope I've welcomed everybody of the public as well at the back. Generally, we used to always have the press here, but nowadays they seem to follow it all online, so please be aware that we are live streaming as well today. And also, could you all kindly be good enough to turn off your mobile phones, please? New members might not be aware that, but it always used to interfere with the apparatus that we've got. I had thought about a 1 minute silence today because of the tragedies that we've had in the country, but I think most of us would have been able to observe that this morning, and you know, everybody does think about it, and we must appreciate how lucky we are to live in the part of the world that we do. Right, I'll now go on with what's next on the agenda. Apologies for absence first, please.
Just one apology, Chair, from Councillor Howard.
Right, thank you very much, Richard. Declarations of interest, please. Councillor Feakin, I believe you have a declaration of interest to declare.
To say that I have seen 6E before in Town Council, and so I'll remove myself from the chamber whilst that's being discussed.
Right, thank you very much indeed for that. Now I'll confirm the minutes of the last meeting. And this is for accuracy only. Let me get to it. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. And page 8. Do you wish that...
Prepared to move them, correct?
Thank
Madam
you. Do you have a
Chair.
seconder, Councillor Higginson? Show of hands for approval of the minutes, please. Right, thank you very much indeed. What I should have done was, before doing the... sorry?
Yes, sorry,
Councillor
Chairman.
Brown?
Could the new members abstain on the vote of the minutes? Because obviously we weren't here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Most of them would have done, I should hope. Would they have new members? Right, thank you. Thank you for that observation.
They need to place a vote on it.
You wish for them to vote that they have abstained on that minute?
I suppose it depends, Chairman, on the practice of this committee. Previous committees I was on did do that, but
Yeah.
obviously that's up to the discretion of the Chairman. Thank you.
Well, usually we find that if you're not there when the minutes, if you were not at the meeting, you don't usually put a show of hands of approving it if you weren't there, so you would naturally abstain. Right, before I did the minute, I think I should have, because there's a lot of officers in front of us today, especially for those that are live streaming, so I think we better do introductions now. I am Councillor Ruth Edwards, Chair of the committee.
Peter Clark, the Vice Chairman.
Thank you.
I'm Robert Tranter. I'm the legal advisor to this committee.
Philip Thomas, Development Services Manager.
Mark Hand, Head of Planning, Housing and Place Shaping.
Richard Williams, Democratic Services.
Shirley Wigham, Housing.
Paula Clark, Development Management Area Manager.
Craig O'Connor, Development Management Area Manager.
Amy Longford, Heritage Manager.
Andrew Jones, Senior Development Management Officer.
David Wong, Senior Development Management Officer.
David Evans, Member of the Planning Committee.
Jim Higginson, Member of the Planning Committee.
Alan Davis, Member of the Planning Committee.
Roger Harris, Member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Maureen Powell, Member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Phil Murphy, Member of the Planning Committee.
Good afternoon, Anne Webb, Member of the Planning Committee.
Afternoon, Louise Brown, Member of the Planning Committee.
David W. St King's Mark Ward, Chepstow, Member of the Planning Committee.
Debbie Blakeburn from Trellick United, Member of the Planning Committee.
Councillor Val Smith, irrelevant to local application. Observing.
Lisa Dimmock, The Elms, here for the Rockfield development.
Matt Feakins, Planning Committee.
Jez Becker, Planning Committee.
Right, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure those who regularly do live stream are now aware of the new members that are on the committee. Right, thank you. The first application, we're not going in order as of your agenda because we have a speaker on only one of the applications today, and that's on page 119 to 122, sorry, 111 to 118, and that's in Agincourt Square in Monmouth. Paula, if you were presenting this, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks a change of use of 1 The Barton, Agincourt Square, Monmouth, from a mixed use of A1, A3 to a full A3 use as an Indian takeaway. It's one that the members visited yesterday on their site inspections. The premises is currently vacant, but was previously used as a tea shop and garden centre. The principle of an A3 use in this location is acceptable in policy terms. The site is vacant and within the central shopping area. There is little change to the external appearance of the building, with a proposed flue on the side and rear elevation near to the car park, away from most residential properties. So you can see there on the plan where the proposed flue is going to go, on the rear of the building there. However, the extraction system will be conditioned so it would meet the requirements of the Environment and Health section to address any potential issues of noise and smells. As this is a takeaway, there is no external seating. All visitors will access the takeaway from the pedestrian access on the Barton, away from the residential properties in Beaufort Arms. All customers will use the car park and will not be able to use the yard, which will be conditioned to be used for staff parking only. The proposed hours of operation are till 11 p.m, which coincides with other businesses in close proximity. The nature of an Indian takeaway is such that meals are taken home and does not encourage lingering in the area, like, for example, a chip shop. Therefore, a condition is recommended limiting the permission to an Indian takeaway only. Officers therefore recommend approval of the application, subject to the conditions outlined in the report.
Right, thank you very much indeed. I believe we have somebody who wishes to speak on that, Mr. Cummings. I think you're well aware of our procedures here at Planning now. Please state your name and you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
David Cummings, Chairman of Monmouth and District Chamber of Trade and Commerce. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the Planning Committee. I'd like to thank the Chair for permission to speak today in support of this application. Mr. Meir, the applicant, successfully ran the Indian Summer Restaurant and Takeaway in the Oldway Centre of Monmouth for a period of 12 years. During the last 7 years, he's been employed as a Community Development Officer for a council other than Monmouthshire and now wishes to return to the town and operate a takeaway. There are numerous letters of support from old customers of the Indian Summer who look forward to its return. There are also a number of letters of objection from residents, mainly on issues of noise and smells. The case officer in her report to the committee acknowledges these issues and makes it a stipulation of the planning department in recommending this application for approval that more work is required on the issues of the extractor fan and filters. See recommendation number 4. The proposed location is close to a number of other restaurants and pubs with licences to operate to 11 p.m. and one large pub just 30 metres or so away from Beaufort Court that opens until 1 a.m. Beaufort Court is situated right in the heart of town, conveniently close to shops, but also to restaurants and pubs. It is an interesting and new experience for me to be referred to in one letter of objection as the irresponsible chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. In response to this, I'd just like to mention that the location of the proposed takeaway is well outside the area of our primary shopping frontages, where we try responsibly to protect change of use from A1 retail to A3. Councillors may say that 3 sources of Indian food in Monmouth is enough. If so, I'd ask them to consider why we need 23 places where one can buy a coffee and 10 places to get a haircut. All these businesses survive and some are prospering, so they must be offering a variation on a successful theme, which is just what Mr. Meir is trying to do. Councillors will be aware, I believe in late correspondence, that the Town Council Planning Committee on 30th of May voted on this application with 3 for refusal and 1 in favour. It is possible that, if the other 5 missing members of the Town Council Planning Committee had attended the meeting and voted, that the decision might have been instead for the approval of the application. One objector, whom I won't name, felt strongly enough on the matter to write to me personally, voicing their concerns on 2 issues, and I'd like to address these. The first being drunk and disorderly behaviour, either in or outside an Indian restaurant or takeaway in Monmouth. I have checked and can find no evidence of any recorded incidents. The second issue concerns the use of buns in an Indian takeaway. Yes, buns. I'm assured by Mr. Meir that buns will never be sold in his takeaway. Therefore, I'd like to reassure the objector that the likelihood of drunken yobs throwing about half-eaten buns near the proposed takeaway, or as the writer suggested, onto my well-manicured lawns, is therefore extremely unlikely. I hope the committee will vote in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Cummings. It's quite enlightening to have a speaker at the beginning of our new administration. Thank you. I believe this is Councillor Feakin's ward. Do you wish to speak on the application?
I haven't got any comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. A good many members of the committee were there yesterday, so I would appreciate comments from those that were there first of all. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From what I can see and what I've read, I have no problem with this whatsoever. I think the most important thing is going to be the extraction flue and the proper working of the extraction flue. It looks like, it says here, it's fitted with a 3-stage carbon filter, so I'm sure that's going to be, well, I hope it's going to be effective in removing any smells. What I did notice on the objectors, and it comes up regularly on any application for takeaway, is people littering. And I can't emphasise strongly enough that it's the people that are buying the food that are littering, and it's not the man who's serving the food out in the establishment. In other words, it's the customers that are problematical there, and they haven't got the right sort of manners to do a proper job. But anyway, basically, as I say, I have no problem with this, and I move approval.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Jim Higginson. Thank you. Then Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And yes, I was along there yesterday and had a real good look at it. I think Councillor Harris is right with regards to the flue, but these days flues are far more scientific than they ever used to be. Carbon filtration is a lot better than it ever was. And I'm not naive enough to say that there won't be any smell of curry that comes through the windows. But it's in what I consider to be a suitable location for that. I don't think, again, that littering will be the problem, because it's not that sort of outlet. And it is, as far as I'm aware, the only actual takeaway in Monmouth. Other restaurants do a limited takeaway service, but I think this is the first of its kind, so it isn't duplicating anything that's really there. Vehicle access is easy, so people should be able, I would imagine most people will order in advance and just come and collect, so I don't think it'll have the same disruptive effect as a lot of places. So I'd be happy to second the recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, everything I wanted to say has been said, and but I fully support this application. I think it's ideal. This premises is currently empty, and I think it'll be put to good use.
Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The question that was raised by objectors, and also I think by Monmouthshire Town Council, was about the hours of opening. And looking at the hours of opening, which is on page 117, they are quite substantial hours: 9 to 11 Monday to Saturday, and 10 to 10:30 on Sundays and bank holidays. And just wondered, at least on Sundays, if they could close a little earlier than 10:30, just because obviously that's recognised as a day of rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Anybody else wish to comment? Sorry,
Chair, just on that one, on page 116, 525, it does say it is recommended that a closing time of 10:30 p.m. is recommended for Sundays and bank holidays. Maybe if it's not conditioned, that maybe we could agree to that.
please.
13 for the application.
Those against the application? That's one.
So the application is approved.
Right, thank you very much indeed, Rob. We go back now to the on the agenda, which is Monmouth, and that is Troy House, Mitchell Troy. You're presenting this, Craig? Are you?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll wait a moment then for Mr. Cummins to leave the chamber. Thank you. Okay, Craig, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, this is application DC 2008-00723. It is an application at Troy House, Mitchell Troy. A lot of members were there yesterday on the site visits, were able to see the building. This is a photograph of the building on the presentation. It's a large three-storey Grade 2 star listed building. It's a traditional large house that has 4 levels. Troy House is one of the most significant buildings in Monmouthshire, not only because of its size, but also due to its architectural and historical significance. It's a building which is identified at risk on Monmouthshire's building at risk database, and it is elevated chance of decline. The house has been altered over time, and there are additional buildings, more modern buildings, being added to it over the years. These are the buildings here on the east side of the building, which have been added over the years. More modern buildings which we used when it was previous use as a school. And there are additional buildings at the rear as well, more modern additions, and also a chapel as well, which has been added to the building over time. It's a very sensitive location. It lies within the Wye Valley Outstanding Natural Beauty, and it's also in a registered historic park and garden, and also lies within a C2 flood zone as well. So it is a very sensitive location indeed. The proposals are to convert the traditional house into 23 luxury apartments, and then also with enabling development on each side of the traditional building, in an east wing and a west wing, for new apartments as well. So there's a mixture of conversion and new build development. If I show you the location plan. So if you look at the site plan here, the Troy House, Phil, the middle bit is the Troy House. So that is the building which is being converted for residential use. And the 2 wings on each side, on the east and west, are the new build parts of the development. So I just go backwards. So this is the front of the elevation. You can see the Troy House in the middle and then the wings on each side. So you can actually get a feel for how the building would look if it was to be constructed. So the additional wings would be constructed of sympathetic materials to match up with the house and be of a similar design and architectural merit. So that is basically how the building would look. Also on the location plan, you can see at the front of the building there will be plenty of parking for the building, and the gardens and the area around it would be landscaped over and above what it is at the minute. Access would be from that rural lane then, as we seen yesterday, to connect onto the B road at the top. So that is the proposed development. The application was submitted with the local planning authority over 8 years ago. And as officers, we've been trying to get it to a positive conclusion ever since. With our outstanding aim is to preserve and make sure that that heritage asset is kept for future generations. Obviously at the minute it is falling into disrepair and it is deteriorating, which is why it's on the building at risk register. So officers have been trying during this period to get the application to a positive state. Over the last 24 months, discussions have been held with the applicant to try and get some momentum on the application to move things forward. And in doing so, the council did agree to help the applicant by supporting a BAT survey and trying to facilitate the development and move things forward, and which was conducted, and the applicant has had sight of the BAT survey and is aware of the ecology issues at the site. However, given that time, and there's still a number of issues outlined in the report why there's a lack of information for the officers to come to a positive determination on this application, and at this stage we're unable to be able to support the application as outlined in the report. There are a number of issues at the site which I want to run through with the planning committee members so that you're aware of all of the issues. So going forward, to give officers and the applicant an idea of how you consider the application and how you'd like us to proceed with it. As I mentioned, the application does lie within flood zone C2. So the principle of the development of this highly vulnerable form of residential development in this location is deemed to be unacceptable in national policy in TAM 15, Technical Advice Note 15, and also within our own local development plan in SD3. However, obviously this building needs to come back into beneficial use, and this type of use is considered to be appropriate for this building, subject to meeting other tests within Technical Advice Note 6. So we do consider this to be a brownfield site. We do also consider it that it is suitable for development and would be a regeneration of the building. However, the applicant now needs to demonstrate that the consequences of flooding can be reasonably managed, and that is the information within the flood consequence assessment which needs to come forward, which is still outstanding, and Natural Resources Wales have objections on those grounds. But that's just to make members aware that the principle of this development is deemed to be controversial, have conflicting issues with planning policy. However, as officers, we feel that there are overriding merits, and on balance, we feel that we'd like to support the application, subject to a detailed flood consequence assessment dealing with some of those issues coming forward. One of the second elements is that the proposed development requires a significant amount of enabling developments I've shown you. So those wings is going to be new build development to ensure that the building can be preserved and converted. We've been issued with a viability report from the applicant, and it clearly shows that the construction sites and anomalies with converting the building are significant. So to bring this forward and to preserve the building, it does require a lot of work, and therefore this new build is required. However, unfortunately, look at those figures and looking at the viability, the site wouldn't be able to provide any affordable housing, and it certainly wouldn't be provided any Section 106 monies because of the amount of work that needs to be done to the building. So I just wanted to make members aware of that. Thirdly, ecology. As I've said already, the council have got a bat survey done, and it has found a number of species at the site, including bats, dormice, water voles. There's a number of species there which need protection. Ecology is a material planning consideration in dealing with a planning application, and this application hasn't got the information which outlines how the species would be mitigated for at this present time. So we are unaware of how the development would cater for and preserve ecology species at the site. So that information needs to come forward as part of the application as well. The site is also heavily connected to two special areas of conservation as well, SAC sites, one in the Wye Valley and one in the Forest of Dean, and our biodiversity officer needs more additional information to ensure that the development at the site isn't going to have a harmful impact on those very significant ecology sites as well. Natural Resources Wales have issued an objection on that grounds in terms of ecology, because they would be the people who would issue the licence. At the moment, they haven't got the information they need to be able to issue the licence as well. So, as outlined in the report, that mitigation work is required. The fourth issue, which is obviously a huge issue, is the heritage impact of the proposed development. The proposed changes involve alterations to part of the building that are most sensitive and would have an unacceptable impact on these remaining areas of importance within the building, the very character of which is important enough to warrant the proposed level enabling development. There are also proposed, with the additional information that's required, there could potentially result in changes to the plans as well. So the ecology mitigation and the proposed viability of the site would potentially make alterations to the listed building, which my colleague Amy would have to look at and go through and ensure that the fabric of the building is retained and that there's no harm to that heritage asset. So there's still areas of concern around that at the moment, which we need additional information on. Another issue which has been raised by Natural Resources Wales is the landscape impact of the development. They are objecting to the new build wings on each side. As officers, we do not feel that that is a reason for refusal, and we feel that there wouldn't be a harmful landscape impact of this development, given the grouping of the buildings and it's associated with Troy Farm, and also the landscape and the topography there as well. We don't feel it would, but just to make members aware that there is an objection from the Statutory Council C regarding landscape. There's also archaeological concerns from Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, and they've outlined that a full evaluation of the site needs to be done prior to its determination. So that is one of the pieces of information which is still outstanding as well. And that information would then feed into the heritage aspects as well, and how the building and the site is developed. So it's kind of all very cohesive, really. All is if information is needed to get a balanced picture of the overall development as to whether it's acceptable. Another issue at the site is the highways and the access and safe access for all users and vehicle users. The junction on the top is very busy, as you're aware, and the applicant needs to submit information for highways colleagues to assess safe egress on to that access point. And at the moment that hasn't come forward. So again, we're looking to get that information to ensure that we can balance that against policy MV1 of the local development plan. Another outstanding issue is trees. The applicant has not submitted a tree survey for the site, and there are tree preservation orders at the site. So we, again, as part of the collective of information that is required, that information is needed and submitted so that we can fully assess the impact that it's going to have on those protected species. on those protected trees. We don't feel, however, obviously some of these aspects of the information that's required, we don't see them as, for instance, the trees and the highways and the archaeological information. We don't see them as reasons for refuse the application going forward. And as officers, we certainly do want to look to support this application. It's just that we need this additional information to balance up the impact of the development. So it is highly regrettable to date this application is being presented to committee, unfortunately not with a positive recommendation. We do, as officers, want to ensure the long-term preservation of this significant heritage asset, and that is our fundamental aim and objective of this application, and this is why it's been in the system for a number of years now. As I said, there's a number of issues which are outstanding, which are outlined in the report in terms of levels of information. So there's a flood consequence assessment required, ecological mitigation, information to ensure the preservation of the heritage asset, additional highways information, tree survey and archaeological evaluation. Given this lack of information, it is regrettable, as I've said, that we are recommending refusals for the reasons outlined within the report. Since this time, the applicant has been in contact with planning officers and has requested additional time to submit that information. As officers, we feel that the application has been in for a significant amount of time, and we do want to see momentum and also protect that building as well, because it is left to be deteriorating. However, we would, as being pragmatic and trying to get a positive resolution to this application, we do think that we can give a significant bit more time for that information to come forward. However, we would like to see a deadline on that to get momentum, and also to ensure that if needs be, we can look to protect the building. So the first recommendation is to get your authorisation resolution to refuse the application. However, be it that we would give the applicant to the 31st of July to submit the additional information that is requested. However, if that information is not submitted, then we would be able to issue a refusal on the application given the lack of information. And then the second recommendation, which is outlined in your report, relates to the confidence from the members to seek a urgent works notice under the Town and Country Planning Act. I'm just going to pass you on to my colleague Amy Longford now, who's just going to explain the reasoning for that.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Whilst we've been working, as Craig says, in order to try and get this application to a point where we could approve it, the condition of the building has continued to deteriorate to a point where we feel that there are urgent works that we do need to do to secure the proper preservation. So in line with section 54, there is this urgent works notice that we can specify some minimum works, and we would be looking at patch repairing the roof, and we would be looking at finding some way of proppering some of the heavily decorated 17th century plaster ceilings internally. So those are key areas to stop water ingress and to preserve some of the really important historic fabric. The applicant will be given an opportunity to carry out these works themselves, and we will try and help them achieve this as best we can and provide as much support. However, If he can't or won't, then we would love to serve the notice in order to be able to secure the building. So we ask you for your agreement in order to be able to, should the negotiations break down and we be forced to actually go in and do the works ourselves in order to be able to secure them to serve this notice.
Thank you very much, Craig and Amy, for that report. Councillor Murphy, please, first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And can I start off by commending the officers for the tenacity in trying to get this application dealt with. I find it absolutely incredible that having sent out, despite everything else that's gone on, a letter which spelled out in words of one syllable last July exactly what the problems were and exactly what to do to get a favourable comment, that we only find ourselves now, when it's listed for refusal, in a position where the applicant has actually appeared to wake up and want to do something about it. I want to support the officer's recommendation that that we are minded to refuse it, but are prepared to grant an extension to our meeting of the 1st of August, whereby I would say that if we don't have sufficient information, then that we will have to refuse it. But I'm far more interested in the preservation of the building. That building is priceless in terms of the heritage of the county. It's a crying shame that it's fallen into wreck and ruin. It's not quite in the same state as a particular building in my ward, which we dealt with recently, but it won't be long left to its own devices before it will be. So I very much support the issuing of a repairs notice. So my recommendation would be that we agree with the officers that we are minded to refuse, but will delay that decision until our meeting of the 1st of August. And of course, if it does come in by then, it will go out to consultation again, and everything starts again. Of course, if we give it approval, you've got 5 years to do it anyway, and in that time, the place could have fallen down. So, yes, definitely to the repairs notice, and I support the one last chance to be given to the applicant.
Thank you very much for that, Phil. I believe it's Councillor Harris next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I agree with everything that the officers out the front have said, and the if you like, the compromise that Councillor Murphy has just put forward. It's a pity that we've got to this state, and it should be glaringly obvious to the applicant from what's been said by the officers that they really want to support what's going on here. And I can but hope that we get the relevant information that is requested by the 1st of August, and we're not at the Planning Committee in August in a position of having no choice but to refuse the application. I hope it doesn't come to that. Secondly, I also support the second recommendation. These places can deteriorate so quickly, and with something as unique as this in our area, it will be a tragedy if remedial works weren't carried out. So I support Councillor Murphy's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right. Thank you very much. Debbie Blakeborough now, please. Councillor Blakeborough.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Yeah, really echoing what the first two members have said, Councillor Murphy and blimey, brain's gone. How long have I known you? 6 years. Don't know your name. I have to say, I went out there yesterday. What a treasure! Didn't even know it was there. And listening to the officers, tenacity, but passion as well. Definitely a great passion to protect this amazing building. And it's about protecting, preserving it, but also enhancing it as well. Tenacity, 8 years you've been working with this applicant. Huge support with advice. And financial support to try and move it along. So yes, I think one more chance, deadline, information by the 31st. I hate bureaucracy. I hate having to, have all of these forms filled and reports written, but to move forward it has to be done, and I think the applicant just has to accept that. And yes, because it is a treasure, our priority is to preserve it, and so I would definitely support the repairs notice, and hopefully the information does come through, and if we do have to take that extra step to serve a notice, it is about, I think you said, it's about rescuing that building and rescuing that history. So I would support the recommendations of the officers on this.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Higginson next, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. When we went there yesterday, the building is impressive. There's no argument about that. And when you spend a little bit of time just I'm looking at it, it's clear that there's a lot of work needs doing, and it needs doing urgently. And for me, I agree with everything me said, and I also congratulate the officers on first of all, bringing this to here and now, if you like, but the work they put into it over the years, this should be sorted out a long time ago. Unfortunately, we do get these frustrations from time to time, and as Councillor Murphy said, we've had it elsewhere as well, and I think, by refusing it now and by imposing the conditions that have been suggested, then you might bring it to a satisfactory conclusion. The sooner the better.
Thank you, Councillor Higginson. Right. If you could pause a moment, I believe, wish that Mark...
I'll come in just before the vote, that's all right.
Afterwards?
Just before the vote.
Right, that's fine. Thank you, Mark. I have Councillor Webb, then Councillor Brown, then Councillor Allen, and then Councillor David Dovey.
Thank you, Chairman. Disappointed there's no member of the Town Council here and at the site visit yesterday. I just want to make that point on such an important building in Monmouth. But secondly, the repairs work, have you any idea if we do have to go in, roughly, Amy, is it going to be a huge cost to us as an authority, please?
We're not entirely sure. There's a lot of work to do in between now and then to figure out the extent of works required and whether we will need to go in or not. As I say, this is a last resort, and we'll try and do our best and work with the applicant as possible.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I do agree with the recommendations in relation to deferment and the urgent works notice, but I just wondered, Chairman, if we could get a response from the officers as to whether or not the urgent works notice also needs to include boarding up some of the windows, because I noticed on the site visit that some windows were boarded up and others weren't, and obviously bordering the windows isn't necessarily a particular high cost, but obviously it stops wind and rain getting into the property, and I just wondered whether or not that had been considered or if it could be added on. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you wish to answer that, Amy?
Yes, please. Yes, boarding up windows is something that you can put on an urgent works notice. However, it does actually sometimes, in some cases, continue to deteriorate the building because it shows that it's unoccupied, and it can often lead to vandalism and theft. There is somebody living there at the moment. The building is partly occupied, so obviously it wouldn't be appropriate to block up the windows in the areas of the building that is occupied. But I think we would like to do our best to try and work with the applicant first and encourage them to do the works that is necessary before we resort to that. It might be that we would serve 2 notices, one doing the roof and probably the plaster ceilings, and if we felt it necessary we could go back and serve an additional one relating to boarding up windows. But me personally, I have a particular concern about that.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, just to come back on that, I mean, obviously, when we went on the site visit, there was some windows that were normal windows and there wasn't a problem with, and there were some windows that were boarded up, and there were some windows that had got absolutely no glass in at all. So really, it was the windows that had got no glass in at all that I was thinking would be better to be boarded up, because in a sense, it's already got a partial boarded up appearance in any event. Thank you.
I think we'd have to go out and have a proper good look at it and think about the specification window by window, and it might be that there are windows that would need to be boarded up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. On that, I'd like to comment. There was a listed building very close to where I live, and it was empty for a good many years. And once it was boarded up, it was, way, hey, this is empty. And they stripped the roof and did no end of damage, because it was more or less a notice to say to anybody driving by that it was unoccupied. So it can have that effect as well. Anyway, I'm sure Amy will know what she's doing, and I suppose cooperation with the applicant. Councillor Alan Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think anybody that visited the site yesterday would have been very impressed with the building. It really is a stunning building. It must be preserved for future generations. I think, you know, our planning officers would be commended. They've bent over backwards to do everything they can to support the owner. But I think in terms of preserving the building, it's clear there's damage to the roof. Water ingress is going to be one of the worst problems there. So while I back what's been said in terms of giving this person time now to put things in order, I think we really need to move on as quickly as we can, because this building will deteriorate significantly if we don't. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor David Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This house has played a part in my youth, if you like, in that it was a beautiful house when I was growing up, and one that people used to pay some considerable attention to, and the people of Monmouth be very proud of. I echo Councillor Webb's comments that it was surprising that there was nobody there from the Town Council at the meeting we had yesterday. I think what has happened to the house in a way that it has got to the situation that it is at the moment is almost, you could call it vandalism, because it's passive vandalism, if you like, in that nothing has been done by the owner to maintain it. So I don't think, no, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Nothing has been done by the present owner to maintain it, so it's got to have a question mark over it. So, and I am concerned as well about the fact as to whether you do board it up, because we had the mount in Chepstow. For some years it was sort of abandoned, and the moment it was boarded up, then it became an attraction for just about everybody who wanted to break in and have whatever fun they chose to have in it. And the last time I went in it, before it was redeveloped, the place was on fire inside, where they'd been lighting fires and smoking pot and God knows what. So that is a question. It's a fine balance about whether you do it or whether you don't. The one thing that I really want to be sure of, though, that in any of the discussions that we have with the owner of this property, the date of the end of July is a date that there should be no slippage here, because at least at that point we have time to do what we need to do to ensure that the building is secure in terms of no further damage from the weather, and we'll have the winter after July in quick order. So that's really the key point. There should be no compromise in what we do. The timing is crucial. Another winter there will see that building depreciate enormously. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, and I truly do agree. It's a wonderful building in the county, and I remember it as a school, and it was in its heyday looking beautiful. So, but I just wonder what the mindset of somebody owning such a building to let it go into such disrepair. Mark wishes to comment before I go to the vote.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points. The applicant agent's really pleased that we've agreed to take this amended approach at a late stage. He's really keen to work with us and find a resolution. So hopefully we can get that sorted by the end of the month. I didn't want to drag out the debate about the boarding, but just to point out, as Craig mentioned, with the bats and the ecology, there's some really significant interest there with bats. So we'll have to leave some of the openings open, not boarded anyway, because we can't prevent the bats going in, and that is it's quite a significant presence there. In terms of progressing, we've got a meeting arranged for next week with the applicant's agents, so they are really keen to make progress. Just one point I did want to make, Chair, in terms of if members are minded to support that amended recommendation, which it sounds like hopefully you are, is we'll be seeking the authorisation to make that decision today. So if the information is not received by the 31st of July, my preference for ease and progress is for us to then be able to issue the decision rather than bring it back to committee. If nothing else, because of the timing of publication of agendas, it will then be the September meeting rather than the one the day after. So if you're happy with that approach, I'm optimistic we'll have the information in, but should that not happen, we'd ask your permission to issue the decision under delegated powers, refused as per the officer report. Thanks.
Does everybody understand now exactly what Mark has said? Right. I believe, Phil, you wished to move?
Yes, please, Chair, and to support Mark's suggestion just then.
Right. Anybody else wish now to approve? Seconded? You're seconded. Right, thank you. Show of hands to approve the recommendations.
That's unanimous, Chair. So the application is refused, but the refusal notice won't be sent at all until after the 31st of July to allow on for the negotiations we have.
All clear on that now?
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, yes. And you're happy with that as well, Amy? Yes. Right, thank you.
Chair, so yeah, just to clarify, the urgent works notice, that's approved as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We now go to page 21, and this is Rocket Caldecott, application 00095, and this is at Ifton Manor Farm, Chestnut Drive.
Phil, do you mind operate the slide for me? Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So.
David, your present.
Yes, thank you. First of all, congratulations, Madam Chair. So these are some of the slides showing the actual sites that we're looking at. So this is a photo taken on the Caldecott Road, looking towards the site. As you can see, bang in the middle, you can see a glimpse of an existing building. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Thank you. So this is the entrance of the site. There's another photograph showing the large existing stone building which occupies in the middle of the field. These are some of the houses on the adjacent sites. Again, yeah. Okay. So this is the block plans of the proposed site, showing the ownership of the ground. So this is the actual site plan or the layout of the housing developments. So so this is a scheme for 12 houses. The site is known as Ifton Manor Farm Rocket, and the scheme is based on a cul-de-sac layout, comprises 10 market houses and 2 affordable houses. The 2 affordable houses is at the entrance of the site. The land currently occupies a number of redundant farm buildings. The site is actually located on the eastern edge of Rocket. The vast majority of the site is within the settlement boundary of Rocket. although a small part of the site is located outside the boundary, with part of one of the dwellings, plot 6, and one garage serving plot 7 just beyond the boundary, together with garden areas. Having said that, it is considered that the encroachment into the green wedge is of a very small nature, and the proposed site boundary takes development up to a logical physical boundary on the ground, to which additional green planting, screen planting and a green infrastructure scheme will be provided. Therefore, the openness of the green wedge will be maintained, and the development will not conflict with the purpose of the destination. There are some existing dilapidated buildings on the site, and this application is proposed to demolish these, and their replacement with a built form which is similar to the existing houses immediately adjoining to the site. Therefore, it is considered to be beneficial in visual terms. The actual manor farmhouse is not a listed building, as you remember, the large stone building on site. And also the site is not within a conservation area. Therefore, it would not, in this instance, be feasible to retain it within the development for viability purposes. Although the building stone can be reused for the boundary wall of the proposed development, and also for the repair of the large existing stone wall that bounds the site. The two affordable houses are designed to design quality requirements set by the Welsh Government for affordable homes. So in terms of the exterior material of the dwellings, a traditional palette has been chosen of painted render walls with reconstituted tiles for the roof, and also windows would be UPVC. Further conditions are requested to agree samples of material and surfacing material to ensure a high quality outcome. With regard to the trees, unfortunately, some of the trees will have to be removed to facilitate the development. The council tree officers and the ecologists have been consulted, and there is no objection provided that the necessary planning conditions are imposed to mitigate the loss of the existing trees and also the existing natural features. Overall, it is considered that the proposed visual impact of the development will be in keeping with the surrounding area in terms of the scale, density, and design. Some of the existing neighbors would like to see the group of the proposed houses at the back that backs onto yew tree rise to be turned 90 degrees so that they have the gable walls facing their properties. However, the current layout being proposed makes the best use of the site and is able to achieve satisfactory planning standards between the proposed and existing development. So the proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of impacts on neighbor amenity. For example, the habitable room windows between the existing and the proposed housings are at least 21 meters away from the neighbors. In terms of access, there will be a single point of access of Chestnut Drive into and out of the site, which has been designed to enable the turning of refuse and emergency service vehicles, which will be able to enter and leave the site in a forward gear. Off-street parking, the proposal meets the council standard and should not lead to on-street parking on existing residential roads. Bat surveys have been carried out and mitigation is proposed within the scheme. Natural Resources Wales and the council's in-house ecologists have no objection to the proposal, provided that suitable conditions are imposed in relation to bat mitigation. A separate bat license will be required with the NRW before development can commence. There are some residents, existing local residents, have concerns about traffic disruptions. Temporary disruption to existing residents from construction of traffic would not be grounds which to refuse permission. because it's likely to be short-lived. However, a construction management program is proposed to be conditioned to enable works to take place in a considerable manner. Finally, an off-site financial contribution of £4,230 per unit was requested by the Council's Recreation Department for children's play area, open space and adult recreation. The current proposal comprises 2 affordable housing units on site. Having consulted with our senior strategy policy officer for housing, it has been advised that with the additional requests, the proposal will become financially unviable, and the developer will not be able to provide the 2 affordable housing units on site. And within the adopted local development plans, it is stated that in the event that viability consideration indicates that not all the identified contribution can be reasonably provided by the developers, priority will be given to the affordable housing required by the affordable housing policy within the LDP. Therefore, in this instance, officer accepts that only the affordable housing provision will be requested. To conclude, it is the officer's view to recommend approval, subject to the condition listed and as amended in the lay correspondence, and also subject to the Section 106 agreement to secure the 2 units of affordable housing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, David. I believe this, is it Linda Guppy's ward? Yeah, and obviously she's not here today and she isn't a member of the Planning Committee. Do we have an adjoining member wishing to speak? Or anybody on it? No? Yeah, all right. Councillor David Evans, please.
Unfortunately, Madam Chair, I wasn't on the site visit yesterday, but I've looked at that area for quite a long time, and you know, I thought there's a space there going waste, unnecessary, and I think what's been put in front of us today, it's good, it's acceptable, and if I would propose that we accept the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor Evans. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I was very impressed with it yesterday. It's a smashing site. I didn't even know it existed, so I was really pleased to find we can find somewhere to put 12 houses in Roggett. The drawings that we've got, David, of the new development are very small scale and don't give us any detail of the roofs. If the roofs on the new houses can be the same, reflect the roofs on the existing houses in the lead-up, that would be absolutely fine. But the drawings are of such a small scale that we've got in front of us that we can't get the detail which we normally like. And secondly, can the houses at the rear please have the same window details as at the front? Once again, we've only got front elevations of the houses in the drawings, and we haven't got a rear elevation. What's it? Yeah, certainly on the affordables. On the affordables they do, but the rest I haven't got rears.
Yeah, Chair, on the street scenes, I think you've only got the fronts, but the other floor plans are in the presentation there. So you can see the windows are the same front and back. Yeah. We can get extra details on the roof and the eaves and the like. That's not a problem.
No, but the existing development, Mark, is exactly as we like, as you well know, and if we can reflect that, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. What we don't want to do, we've had this before, we've said this at meetings, and then we go to site when they're built, and our officers unfortunately have missed our point, and we still get flush fascias and things which don't look appropriate.
Yeah, noted, Chair.
Councillor Becker at the back, please, then Councillor Webb, Councillor Brown. We'll take it from there as we go in along. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just confirm for me the adopted status of the road that's going to be built on the estate? It will be adopted by the council. There's not going to be any problem with collection of bins in that area. And
Chair, do you want me to cover that as a general point? We can require the roads to be made up to adoptable standards, and that's our basic starting point. But it's always up to the developer if they actually pass it over for adoption. Unfortunately, no one from Highways can be here today, but that is the approach we have to take everywhere. So it'll have to be up to the right standards, but whether or not they do pass it over, is the developer's choice. Most of them do pass it over. They want it to be done. Every now and again, you'll get one that doesn't and has a private management company. If that did happen, they'd have to arrange a way of also getting the bins on collection day to the edge of the adopted highway. But that isn't something we'd invite or welcome, but it isn't something we can prevent.
Thank you, Anna. And another quick question, Chair, if it's all right.
That's quite all right.
Can we have some kind of provision in there to prevent any creep into the green wedge? I mean, it's not being too much intrusion into it in the plans as they stand, but
That's actually a stone wall, so that will form a solid edge.
All right, okay. Sorry, I was looking at the green line that was slightly lower down on it.
Within it, so the view from the road, that first shot we saw, will actually be a softer edge to the development, and then the housing will start.
Okay.
So yeah, there'll be a strong physical boundary to the site to stop any further development.
And
It won't stop it, but
Sure.
it'll be a matter of consideration in the future, but we just want a physical boundary.
And also it says that they can reuse the stone on site. It'd be a shame to lose that stone. Is there a way of saying that they should use the stone on site rather than they can?
I actually imagine they could be encouraged, and depending on the condition of the stone and where they want to use it.
I mean, it is the applicant or the agent's view to reuse some of the stone on part of the development.
Yeah, those parts.
And also part of the existing walls is needs to be strengthened. So some of the stone can actually be reused on the existing wall.
Sure. As long as that's strongly encouraged, I think it's a good use of the space. So.
And I should think it's more cost effective to use what's already there
Yeah,
anyway
you'd
for
hope.
them. Yeah,
So.
I should think it'd be rather expensive otherwise. I have.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I welcome David? I think it's really good that he's presenting this report because he's been dealing with the application. I did actually mention it quite a long time ago that I would really appreciate officers attending, and I really appreciate the attendance today presenting the application. Not that we don't like you and Phil actually presenting it, but I think it's really interesting for you to hear us as well and to be here, and thank you for that. Just one small point, going on from Councillor Clark's comment about the roofs. Is there any opportunity for coin stones down the side to make the buildings look a bit softer? Perhaps there isn't in this case, but they could look a bit...
I suppose the short answer, Chair, is that there is. I'm not convinced there'd be a justifiable reason to insist on them. Some of that comes a bit down to personal tastes. I would personally think it would make them look a bit fussy rather than keeping them a bit more simple. I think what's been drawn up looks good. And thinking about the site that it's immediately next to, that does reflect it well.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just looking at the conditions. I think there's a condition 7 which talks about before any works commence on site, a plan indicating, etc., to do with the boundary treatment. Now, I wasn't quite clear whether the boundary treatment included the boundary wall with the existing properties, because if it doesn't, then I think it would be helpful if there was a similar condition added about before any works commence on site to do with the satisfactory treatment of the boundary wall. And I'm thinking in particular of the boundary wall that's between the existing properties that are already built. Yeah. I mean, that had quite a bit of greenery on top, and it did obviously need renovating to a satisfactory standard. And I think it was something that was brought up at the site visit, and the applicant didn't seem to have any objection to that. So I'm just wondering whether or not that can be added as an extra condition, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are you happy with that, Mark? Or?
I think it would be covered by condition 7, but we can tweak the wording. Rather than having an extra one, we'll tweak the word into condition 7 to make sure that's covered.
Councillor Webb?
Do we need to approve the amendment of the condition 17? Do we need to approve that as a committee?
Yeah, Chair, on the late correspondence, we'd incorporate whatever's included in that as a officer recommendation as part of your decisions. Yes, please. Thanks for reminding us of that.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Blakeborough.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It isn't pertinent to this particular development, but it is pertinent, I think, to the area, in that sometimes we go to places and we see things that we didn't even know existed before. Like there was a bungalow there which was pretty derelict, but then the one that really interested me was in what almost looked like a square boxed up area with one wall open, and in there was a white cabin type bungalow. I cannot remember ever a cabin bungalow being given planning permission by, it was a timber bungalow, given planning permission by us. And what went through my mind was, is it a building that we have given planning permission for? Because it didn't look right to me.
Sorry, Councillor, I wasn't there at that site yesterday, so...
Chair, we don't know. What we'll do is have a check. It was brought to our attention on the site visit, so it's on our radar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Councillor
Chair.
Blakeborough, then Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to talk about the affordable housing. Disappointed again that we've lost two, and just turning to Shirley, because this lost one. So it's just turning to Shirley in terms of the viability assessment studies. I mean, you've dealt with that right from the beginning, and just looking towards you, are you assured that yeah, this is the best deal we can get from the site in terms of affordable? And then the next question is just about the design of the affordable. I just want to be reassured that the materials used on the market housing will be used on the affordable as well, so it doesn't look out of place, I suppose. I'm looking at it, looks the same to me, but I'm just double checking it's the same materials in terms of quality. And again, looking to Shirley, are you happy on the sizing? Because I noticed they're all detached houses apart from the affordable, which are semi-detached.
Yeah, I did do a great deal of work on this site, and only two. We could only have two. They have been checked by the Housing Association, and they do meet DQR. I did specify 2 beds because that's our greatest need in the area, and that's why they're smaller than the market units.
Thank you. I think we shall have to get some more microphones along the front here if we have more officers. Otherwise, we'll be shouting at one another. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Councillor Davies mentioned this bungalow. I saw it as we were driving out. It looks like it was a mobile home type bungalow with a couple of bits bolted together. So it'd be interesting for you to check that one out. If it is, I presume it's easily removable if we need to.
Councillor Harris.
Well, it doesn't matter if it's been there ages.
Do you wish to speak? Right.
Still.
Thank you, Chair.
It's either right or it's right.
Really, I'm talking about the bungalows as well, surprisingly enough, because there is one bungalow that's derelict there, plus the other one, and I was just wondering whether the access to those properties were considered when this application was recommended.
Yes, Councillor. I mean, the access have been considered by our highway officers, which also considered the existing houses, so there should be no conflict with the existing houses.
Anybody else wish to comment now? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let's go back to the mobile home unit, whichever you want to call it. That's been there for at least 19 years. Right.
Mark will comment on that now.
Then I think we can close the enforcement case if it's been occupied that long. Thanks. We'll have a proper check.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you. You're the adjoining board member. Do you wish to move?
Yes, I would.
You move approval.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Evans? Councillor Higginson seconds. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please?
That's unanimously approved, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Rob. Right, we go on to the next application, 00767, and that is the former public toilets at Tinton on page 37.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, Phil?
This was one we looked at yesterday. It's got a bit of a potted history, this. Oh, that wasn't... That was... Oh. No. Just naturally humorous, you see. No. Cast your mind back. This was actually the site of some public loos, it wasn't a very distinguished building at the time, and approval was given to the adaptation and extension of that building to become a podiatrist services building. Unfortunately, when that started to be built, it appears that the land on which it was being built was made up of a lot of may ground, and it appears that the developer had difficulty actually supporting the existing building when they dug down to build the extension at the side and at the rear, and the existing footings weren't sufficient and would seem to be giving way. That's what appears to have happened anyway, and so a decision was made by the developer to actually start again and start rebuilding the building, and this is the result of that. They didn't have planning permission to do that, which is why we've got this application before us. So this is a retrospective application to carry out this development and finish it. As you can see, it's not finished when we were there yesterday. So the building isn't a conversion and extension, it's now a new build for that same use. Having said that, it's still similar in design, and certainly from the frontage, it looks a little different to what was approved. Actually, if I show you the pictures of the approved scheme, that was the original approved scheme, and actually the front wasn't that brilliant if you look at it from the road, and that's the as-built scheme that's been done. It actually looks better with that sort of dormer window, and it's been designed to look like a sort of wharf side building, as it's so close to the river, with some timber boarding on it. It's almost like almost like a boathouse feel to it. It looks different from the back, from the riverside, because they've had to dig away land at the rear, and they've got now what we call this understory, this undercroft. So there's a sort of lower story beneath where there's a void, which the owner was showing us yesterday, which doesn't have any purpose to it. It's where the foundations are located, but it's actually a void apart from where the actual foundations are within it. So the application is to retain what they've done and complete it. In policy terms, it's not a conversion, but having said that, it is in a settlement. It's close to the existing heart of Tynton. It's next to the main road, which is a bus route, and we think it's a sustainable location for this form of development. So we think in principle, and in policy terms, it can be supported. There's adequate parking for it, both at the front, directly off the road, to the immediate side from the rear, and at the back itself, where there's additional space. The actual proposal only needs 3 spaces, and you could get that certainly at the front and with the space at the side, without impinging upon the parking needs of the workshops, which are to the left, in that building to the left, that old workshop building there. The main issue was flooding from our perspective, which is why the application has taken so long to process. NRW did object initially on the basis that it's in a floodplain, but they acknowledge that the actual accommodation won't flood, which is on the 1st and 2nd floor. Their concerns are about the undercroft, but our view is, provided that isn't used for storage or any functional use, and is kept as a void, that the water can actually seep in through there and accommodate it during a time of flood without impinging upon any other adjoining uses. And indeed, the actual applicant seems to have taken away some of the bank at the back, which actually provides a little bit more capacity, again, without impinging upon the flood storage area generally. So, despite concerns from the community council, we feel it's in appearance very similar to what we would have seen had it been converted, had they been able to, without the ground condition issue they had. So we're happy to recommend approval for this proposal.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Phil. I believe Councillor Webb, this is your ward.
Yeah, what can I say? It's been a long outstanding issue. The community council have been very concerned from the very start. But as long as the officers are happy and it conforms with policy, I'm happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody? Oh, Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I agree with the officers. This is a far better end result than the one that was originally planned. The car parking issues sorted out, the flooding issues sorted out. It looks good within its setting, and I'd be quite happy to go ahead for approval.
Thank you. Did you wish to comment, Councillor Harris? No. Sorry. Right. Any more comments then on that application? Do you wish to move, Councillor Webb?
Councillor Murphy's moved on second.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Murphy's moved. Councillor Webb is seconded. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Right. Thank you very much. We now go to page 45, application 00883, and this is Rockfield Farm, Undy. Presenting this, Andrew. Yes. Right, Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd just like to check that all members have seen late correspondence that came through this morning, in particular from the Mill Ward member, Councillor Francis Taylor. Can I just check everyone's had that? Great. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. The site is one of our 7 strategic sites which will help to meet a substantial part of our new housing allocations in the LDP. The site is allocated under our policy SA5 for around 270 dwellings and for 2 hectares of service land for industrial and business development. So that's use class B1. Just to go through the photographs with you, this is a view from the elms, looking to the northern boundary of the site there. The next photograph is sort of quite a panoramic view. This is taken from the allotments where I believe members were yesterday, so looking towards the northwest of the site. This is the entrance from Rockfield Grove through to the elms. And this is an existing area of play at Rockfield View, which adjoins the site. The site is the other side of that hedgerow. And this is the designated sink, a site of importance for nature conservation, known as Breezy Bank, which is a mature woodland. And I think finally there is a shot of the existing Rockfield farm, which obviously would be demolished as part of this application. So in terms of the application, it's for up to 266 dwellings and approximately 5,575 square metres of B1 employment land. The site itself measures approximately 13.8 hectares and it's located on the northern side of Undy between Rockfield Grove and the M4 motorway. You'll recall from your site visit that in terms of topography, the site rises from the southeasterly corner up to a high point in the sort of southwesterly area of the site, and in general it slopes towards the north. So the master plan sets out the distribution of land uses, which are categorised there in the purple, the residential, and in the top corner, the C1 would be the business use. You also see then the indication of that sink is to be retained and would not be developed upon. And also provides the requirement for the M4 relief road to the north. So the residential area would deliver approximately 25% affordable units, and based on current numbers, that would be approximately 67 units. So as stated, access is considered as part of this outline application, and in this case, the primary vehicle and pedestrian access would be taken from the junction with a B4 245 in the south-easterly corner of the site. And this would be served by a new priority T junction. Within the site, there will be new highway infrastructure, including a local link road that would join the new access on the B4245, and take it all the way through to the western boundary, where it would adjoin the strategic housing site at Vinegar Hill, which takes you through there. So the number of key issues that I'd like to go through, including traffic and access, the area of immediate importance, landscape and ecology, archaeology, noise, and finally drainage. So in terms of traffic and access, as stated, the access would be served by a new priority T-junction. This has been informed fully by a transport assessment that's been considered by the council's highway engineer. This also considered the option of a three-armed roundabout, but the results indicated that a priority T-junction onto the B4245 that would be designed to appropriate standard would operate in all capacity, would operate within capacity in all scenarios, including the development of the Vinegar Hill site, as well as the works potentially to the M4 Relief Road around Newport. Access to the site from the Elms, which is an existing unclassified lane, has also been considered as part of the transport assessment. It would be required to be re-engineered and traffic orders implemented to create a safe and manageable link for both pedestrians and cyclists between the proposed development and the existing Rockfield Grove development. At the same time, this would restrict vehicle movement, so this would help to ensure that it's not used as a rat run, a concern that was expressed by a number of residents. The requirement for a safeguarding route for Omega Undy bypass, which runs through the allocated site, has been carried through successive development plans for a number of years now. The protected route runs through both the application site and the adjoining Vinegar Hill site, and then on into third-party land. The transport assessment has re-evaluated this need and actually concludes to, quote, safeguarding a route for Omega Undy bypass to the south of the site, as set out in the LTP, is not necessary to facilitate the Rockfield Farm development in any of the scenarios tested. So the indicative master plan illustrates, as already stated, a local link road that would instead satisfy the need to provide east to west linkages between the site and Vinegar Hill. So this leads us on to the area of amenity importance, which in the LTP is located along the southern boundary of the site, just all across the southern boundary, yeah. So this was allocated and designated rather under policy DES 2 of the LDP. The majority of this land is private farmland with no public access and no logical boundary. The land does not fulfil an amenity role and was previously included for the sole reason of being a buffer between the edge of the settlement and the indicative Mega and the bypass link. So it's therefore considered that with the bypass no longer proposed, there is no policy justification for this buffer to continue to be a designated area of importance. But would point out, though, that the area of sink to the west edge of the site is to be retained, and this would actually provide links to this area that would actually bring this important green asset into public use. And furthermore, the Council's Recreation Officer has also requested contributions in respect of off-site and on-site recreation, and I'll come on to that later. In terms of landscape and ecology, a number of surveys, as one might expect, has been undertaken in support of the outline application, including a landscape and visual impact assessment, a tree survey, a number of ecological surveys, including a Phase 1 habitat survey. The northern portion of the site, which runs parallel to the M4, is the most elevated of the site, and in line with comments received from our landscape officer, the indicative master plan does illustrate a new landscape buffer that would cloak the northern boundary of the site. In terms of the employment buildings that would be at that most northerly point, obviously they would be, the appearance of those buildings would be considered under future reserve matters applications. And as detailed previously, within the Breezy Bank sink, it's to be retained and a green buffer around it is proposed and will be protected during the development process and carefully managed in the future to ensure that this is of integral value and not degraded with increased public use. So, and to ensure that, a condition is recommended for a construction environment management plan as well as a green infrastructure management plan. Turning to archaeology, the Council's professional advisors on such matters, Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust, have identified an archaeological restraint on the site. A field evaluation done in January of this year found prehistoric material in the fields. I believe it's sort of centrally in Zone B. Which, although not of national importance, was considered to be of regional importance. As such, Glamorgan Gwent requested a condition that would see a written scheme of investigation to be carried out. In this case, the applicants have already done this, and as such, Glamorgan Gwent have accepted this, and instead of providing an alternate condition, requesting adherence to the mitigation strategy that's been submitted. In terms of noise now, the applicant has undertaken appropriate noise assessment, which takes account of the adjoining Vinegar Hill site and also the scenario of the development with the M4 corridor around Newport. The most significant impact would be shown in the predicted levels, would be with the M4 corridor at night without any form of mitigation, and this would result in over half the site falling in noise exposure category C. Noise exposure category C, just to advise, is taken from Technical Advice Note 11, and to just explain that to you, it states that planning permission should not normally be granted. However, where it is considered that permission should be given, for example, because there are no alternative quieter sites available, conditions should be imposed to ensure a commensurate level of protection against noise. In this case, the assessment puts forward a couple of mitigation strategies, the first of which would be a noise barrier along the northern boundary of the site, 6 metres in height and approximately 100 metres in length. The other suggestion was to consider the orientation of the buildings in parcel C2, as well as looking at the internal layout and avoiding habitable rooms overlooking the M4. So the first option of the 6 metre fence, there are planning concerns with that, but obviously this option could be revisited at the relevant reserve matter stage if needed, and the section option could be fully considered with subsequent reserve matters applications, which would consider the detailed design as well as orientation and any sort of suitable mechanical mitigation. It's also noted that the main impact would occur during the night hours and that the mechanical mitigation could be used to achieve acceptable internal noise levels to bedrooms. Noise impact during night hours to external garden areas is not considered to be unacceptable, and that the noise survey does show that even in the event of the M4 corridor going ahead, garden areas in the daytime would be within the lower level category NEC-B. In terms of quickly other environmental health considerations, including air quality, an air quality assessment has been undertaken, and the Council's Environmental Health Officer has confirmed that development would not create unacceptable harm in terms of nitrogen dioxide air quality, and that this was found to be the case irrespective of the M4 relief road going ahead or not. In terms of drainage, a drainage strategy has been designed so that sustainable drainage systems, otherwise known as SUDs, are integral to the site. It would incorporate attenuation areas, rainwater harvesting swales, and permeable surfaces into an interlinked drainage system. It is proposed that all foul flows from the site would be discharged into existing public sewers, and a hydraulic modelling assessment of the site has been undertaken by the developers to assess the ability of the existing sewers to accommodate the proposed development. No objection has been raised by Welsh Water, who advise that once a preferred developer is in place, that they are engaged with to develop solutions for both foul and potable water. So those are the key planning considerations. You'll note in the report that it also sets out planning obligations. So I'll just quickly summarise through the planning obligations, which would include £175,000 for off-site and on-site equipped play. 100,000 of that would go to the Rockfield View play site you saw earlier. £800,000 of off-site adult recreation would go to the Three Field site. £200,000 would go towards the delivery of the Mega Undy station. Over a period of 5 years, £175,000 would go to public transport improvements, in particular the bus service. £70,000 would go to the Mega Undy to Roggett footpath. And as I stated earlier, the site would deliver 25% of the total number of dwellings to be affordable housing, which is in line with the Council's affordable housing policies. In addition, a Section 278 highways agreement will also be sought that would cover the construction of the new access, the T-junction access onto the P4245, and also the improvements to the elms. So subject to these obligations and the planning conditions set out in the officer report, the application is presented to members with the recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew, for a very detailed report. I believe, Lisa, are you here to speak on this application if you'd like? to stand up there. You have 6 minutes, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, for allowing me to speak today. Mega and Hundy has been developed over the years, and the infrastructure has not been developed at the same rate. With no community centre and poor transport links, our community lacks amenities and is becoming overwhelmed by traffic demands. I fear that we will not cope with the increased population from the proposed Rockfield development. But should the Planning Committee go ahead with this development, I would like you to seek detailed answers from the developers on the following. I have concerns over the T-junction going on to the B4245 from the proposed development. When out meeting residents, speed and traffic volumes is one of the greatest concerns. With another 266 houses, that means that we are looking at additional 400 plus cars. The speed of those travelling through Endy could pose potential danger. I would like reassurance from the committee that you will ensure that correct measures are put in place to reduce excessive speeding. With regards to the proposed B1 light industrial area at the rear of the development, will any weight restrictions be implemented on Dancing Hill or through the development? I have concerns over the risk posed by deliveries travelling through these residential areas and those living in that area. I have received many complaints also from Endy residents with regards to parking on Penny Farthing Lane due to congestion around the school drop-off and collection times of Endy School. Off-road parking is required to eliminate the need to park on the lane, which will only be worsened by the proposed development. I ask that the committee review this. After reviewing the 106 allocations, I welcome the 800,000 for the Three Fields site. The community centre has been long overdue, and with 6,000 residents, it is vitally important for our community. I urge the committee to consider looking at providing established sites such as Undy AFC, who is home to 125 active members, which include under 18s and senior members. Is also home to Undy darts, pool, cricket and rugby team on this small site which is forever struggling due to weather conditions and overuse, along with Mega's Sycamore Terrace and Blenheim Park. Both the Mega station and improved bus services are a must. I recently learned that the average bus time in the Sevenside area to get to a leisure centre is 41 minutes, which is nowhere near good enough. If Mega station was reinstated, this could be decreased. I am pleased to see the Mega and Undy footpath to Roggett, and would be great to see a cycle path included. The contributions listed are required imminently, prior to the development being inhabited, in order for the projects listed to commence or improve for the current and new residents. I'd like to see residents engage in the planning and design of this development if it's to go ahead, as it will be dramatically altering the eastern edge of Endy, and I believe residents deserve that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. You'll have 2 minutes later on if you wish to sum up anything at all. Okay? Right, thank you. Mark? Okay, Mark?
Chair, just we come back on a couple of those points before there's discussion, if that's okay. I don't know if Andrew's happy picking up on the other bits, but in terms of just the timescale of Section 106 funding, you'll see in the late correspondence that Councillor Taylor's also raised the issue around Three Fields, which for those of you who are not familiar is a community centre proposed. It's been proposed for many years, I think it's fair to say, but it's now really gathering a bit of momentum. So this is why we're suggesting that all of the adult rec contribution of the 800,000 goes towards that one project. And also we've discussed with the applicants, which is actually our estates department, we discussed with them the timescales for that funding, and that would be brought forward. So normally we look at when the funding comes in and is phased, and that's something we discuss as officers with the legal section, assuming committee were to approve this. The amounts of money and the topics, the actual triggers are agreed with legal afterwards normally. But just to reassure you, that is the intention, that it's all done, or as much is done up front as possible early on. The suggestion that we have the money before anything's occupied wouldn't work though, because until enough properties are sold, there isn't money there from the developers to actually put into the pot. So what the applicants are suggesting is that the Three Fields contribution comes from phase A and D on there, which are the two on the right hand side. Ignore the lettering because A and D would actually for logistical purposes, be marketed together as the first phase. That would be in the region of 140 homes on those two. So they're talking about which would support the contribution for 3 fields coming from those first 2 phases. And then the other contributions, for example, the station, would be looked at in phase 2, which is B on that plan. So that's how we'd look to accommodate that phasing wise. But there isn't, literally a lump of money to give tomorrow, or even when they start sticking a spade in the ground. There is a bit of a time lag, which is normal with planning contributions. Are you happy, Andrew, coming back on the other highways questions?
Yeah, just in response to a couple of points that Councillor Dimmock made. Firstly, in regard to concerns about speed, and that would be covered under the Section 278 Highways Agreement, where we consider moving the 30 mile an hour speed area, which I think was one of your concerns. And also you mentioned about access to the B1 employment land and sort of weight restrictions on vehicles. Again, that would be something that would typically sort of fall under the remit of the 278 agreement in terms of any weight restrictions. So that would cover that. That's okay.
Thank you, Andrew. Right, a lot of members were there and looked at the site. So, right, Councillor Clark. Councillor Dovey, could I alert you to the fact that your microphone is on? Thank you.
Chairman, Councillor Dimmock, did I understand you to say that you prefer, not Councillor Dimmock, did I understand you to say that you prefer a roundabout at the access into the site, or a T-junction?
I think maybe a roundabout would help. Speed coming down that hill and going up into Undy is exceeding, and something needs to be looked at. Whether a roundabout or any other forms of traffic management, I think highways can obviously recommend us on that, but I would prefer a roundabout. I think that would definitely slow down the traffic coming into the village.
I think I'm right in saying that highways are happy to have either at that juncture, and therefore I don't see any problem with one or the other this afternoon. But that's one of the items we need to sort today.
Right. Councillor Davis, then Councillor Maureen Powell, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to concur with what Councillor Dimmock is saying, because that really is a racetrack there. People come out down the hill from Megan into Undy, and then they're accelerating out as they go to Caldicot. And I live in Caldicot and travel that road very often. And it's my belief that a roundabout would be a much better bet there to slow the traffic down than a T-junction. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. When you talked about the noise barrier, were you thinking of just a greenery like shrubs and trees and things, or would there be actually a fence or something more substantial behind it? I mean, normally we think that greenery does hold the noise back, but of course it takes time for it to mature and fill out. And,
yeah, well, there would be a landscaping buffer along there in any event, but no, one of the options was a actual physical barrier, a 6 metre fence was one of the options. The other one being to consider orientation of buildings and other measures like mechanical ventilation. So there was a couple of options, but to confirm on your point, it was proposed as a physical barrier.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Looking at the neighbourhood notifications, which I think are on page 70, I think that the officer's report has dealt with a number of issues, including schooling and so forth. One of the areas that doesn't seem to have been addressed is already existing pressure on local doctors, and I would just like to ask if in future that any major development should actually, although I appreciate that the Health Board is not a statutory consultee, I think to deal with this particular issue it would be very helpful if they were consulted and if a report came back from them, because obviously we've got no comment in relation to that particular issue. I do appreciate this may have been one of the strategic sites under the LDP as far as I know, but I still think that leaves a question mark that needs to be properly addressed, perhaps at the if this is an outline application, perhaps at the a fuller application stage. Another issue that was mentioned was about if the site is divided, to make sure that the full Section 106 contributions are included. The other area that I would like to ask a question again, and this may be a question of looking at the more detailed planning application, is to do with, you've had quite a discussion about the noise, and it wasn't something I'd particularly considered before, but I don't know whether or not there'd be later conditions with regard to double or triple glazing and that sort of thing in terms of the houses that are built, because obviously that helps a little bit with the noise level. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murphy?
I think Andrew wanted to come in there, Chair, so I'll follow him.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor
Right,
Murphy.
Andrew.
No, it was just to say, certainly with the last point there about the use of triple glazing, and indeed any other sort of mechanical mitigation or any other sort of technical mitigation, yeah, that could be considered and potentially conditioned at the relevant reserve matters stage for appearance. So, to answer that question.
Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that that this is in the LDP, which was debated at length in the longest day with those of us who were here then, and obviously needs to go through as a result of that. But the point I wanted to pick up on was this business of the junction, which is what is going to be said in tablets of stone today. Yeah, I travel that road a lot, and it is a fast road, and I agree with Councillor Davis. A roundabout along that road is probably a good idea, and there is probably the best place for it, not just because of the site, but in terms of the management, the traffic along that road. A roundabout there is probably a good idea. So I would like to see that as part of the approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. I don't know what other people think of roundabouts, but they do seem to encourage the flow of traffic more than an actual junction. I don't know if Shirley or whoever can answer this question. Are there any bungalows envisaged to be on this site? To see, if possible, some bungalows on there, as nationally they seem to be in very short supply, but in high demand. Anyway, we'll come to that stage then later, Shirley.
We usually ask for some bungalows.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chairman. Well, more than one, actually, but there you go. I'm away now. It is a point that came up from the councillor across the way, and it isn't exactly a planning point, but in terms of communities, it is a really important point. Members will know that perhaps that there is this well, let's call it an animated discussion between Chepstow, Monmouth and the Aneurin Bevan Health Board. At a recent meeting that we had in Chepstow with the Aneurin Bevan Health Board, where their chief operating officer came and his assistant, when they were really hard pressed, they admitted that they take scant notice of what happens in terms of increasing numbers in an area and how the facilities that they have or indeed might be planning meet them. Now, this is something they actually admitted to. And within communities, it is really an issue, and one that maybe, just maybe, we should update as a council through this body, places like the Aneurin Bevan Health Board, of what is happening in terms of the increase in housing. I know we've got the LDP and all that sort of thing, but you've got such a turnover in the Aneurin Bevan of people, that it is difficult to see that there is the necessary train. So really what I'm saying is we're building these houses, and we take into account, well, Welsh Water and everything else, but health facilities for the residents are in a way almost as well, they are as important as anything else. What I am saying is that we should be, if you like, passively informing the Aneurin Bevan of what is happening in areas, so that they are aware and might hopefully take that into their planning for facilities for the future. I know that's flying a bit wide, but I think it has a resonance perhaps with the residents. Thank you, Madam Chairman,
Thank you, Councillor Doty.
letting me say that.
Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just following on from that, maybe the officers here can tell us, there's an inspector who looks overall at and agrees what our LDP structure is going to be like. Does the inspector take into account things like medical facilities, doctors' surgeries, etc.? It'd be strange if he or she didn't. The other thing I was going to mention, as we've already said, it's the site's in the LDP, so it's deemed that we're going to give it approval. And I think Councillor Dimmock mentioned a very important point there, and we've had a conversation about it already. It's important that herself and residents can have as much input into how they would like to see the site laid out and the type of houses on there. And I think we as a committee would welcome that sort of input within the constraints that we all work with. So you can get to work on your residents, but bearing in mind it's an outlying planning commission with. We're just looking at access only, I believe. So one other thing that was mentioned, and it's a curse everywhere, is the traffic hindrance with school drop-off time. I can assure you that is universal throughout the county, and I don't know what we can do about that apart from encourage parents to let their children walk to school, but I don't see that happening. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Did you wish? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, just one more, Mark. We talked about it yesterday. We've had this several times recently on large estates. We own this land as a county. We'll be releasing it in blocks. Can we have a policy put, or some suggestion to the purchasers that we have some commonality to the design throughout the blocks as they're released? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There's various points raised there. I'll do the easiest one first, which is Councillor Clark's comment. In the late correspondence today, we're suggesting an informative, so a note to the applicant will put on the decision notice, which will seek to tie together that design and appearance ethos throughout the different phases. But each of those detailed applications will come back before us for permission, so it's within our gift, jointly as officers and yourselves, to make sure it does all tie up properly. In terms of the health board concerns, and yeah, as we discussed and agreed in the training session last week, we're happy to start consulting the health board on the major applications, and also there's already data out there. This year's data isn't yet finalised, but you remember me talking about the 5-year housing land supply, and the data that sits behind that sets out every single site in the LDP or with planning permission, and how many homes we collectively with the development industry predict will be built each year over the next 5 years. So that information's out there, and we can direct the health board to that, which will tell them in which, even different bits of Monmouthshire will grow at different rates, and they'll be able to stick that information next to their doctor's surgeries and really make some sense of it. So that is out there publicly already, albeit that this year's isn't yet, but that is something they probably don't know exists, so we can guide them towards that, and that'll be a good source of info for them. But going back a step at LDP stage, the health board was fully engaged, very clear at that stage that the amenities that are out there are sufficient for the 5,000 odd homes that the LDP includes. So it's looked at that time, but we'll consult them on these new applications as agreed last week. Last, but the most significant, is the discussion around the roundabout versus T-junction. The application is in outline, but access is with us now. So we are being asked to consider the full details of that access arrangement, and the details before us now are for a T-junction. So that is what's before committee. There's nothing from highways or from the transport assessment that suggests that doesn't work. So in planning terms, we haven't got grounds to go back and say, no, we demand a roundabout. And I think there's other possibly more cost-effective and less land-intensive ways of delivering that traffic speed control other than a mini roundabout. And again, highways aren't here, unfortunately, due to other meetings and other commitments. But generally speaking, a roundabout will work best when the flows are roughly equal on each arm, which wouldn't be the case here. This is slightly my ABC guide to transport engineering. They have said it could work, but equally they're happy that a T-junction works, and that's the proposal that's before us. So our recommendation, our reports and their advice is all based on that T-junction rather than a mini roundabout. But there would be those other Section 278 works, which include moving the 30 mile an hour limit considerably to the east towards Roggett. So the vehicles are well and truly slowed down before they get into there. And if that isn't working in itself, then they've got other speed control measures or those flashing signs and the like. So that's what's before us at the moment, Chair. It is the T-junction. So if you wanted something else, it would be a case of deferring and getting that drawn up. But I'm not sure there's a justification there to insist upon that. Thank you, Mark. Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, I've been giving a bit of thought to that too, and of course the difference between the cost of a road junction and the roundabout isn't known to us, so I don't think we can make that decision now. Our highways officers have looked at this. They do know what they're doing. We have to make a decision on this now, and there are things we can do to a junction to slow the traffic down. So on reflection, I'm comfortable that highways officers have looked at it and that the junction is probably the more appropriate. But it doesn't take away anything I said about the speed of traffic. We can do something about that.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Brown?
Yes, I was just thinking of, some form of compromise here as to whether or not, obviously, we're discussing the possibility of a T-junction or a roundabout. Would it be possible to put anything in just to say about consideration of other traffic calming measures? I appreciate that the speed limit boundary is one of them, but there may be others in terms of, I don't know, visual displays and so forth. I mean, they can do things to make exits better, or, traffic calming, I don't know, a hump or something. I don't know what would be suitable in that area, but there are, I don't think on highways it's a strict choice between either a T-junction or a roundabout. I think there are extra things that highways can look at, and I don't know whether you could add an informative or something of that nature at this stage, so at least the options are a bit more open. Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, just to clarify, we'd be looking, because access is with us, the full details of the access, we'd be looking at making that decision now if it's a T-junction or not. But we can certainly, possibly better than do it as an informative, we can make sure it's in the minutes that those other highways issues are are looked at, and different mechanisms for reducing traffic, because under Section 278 of the Highways Act, ignoring the fact that it's our bit of land as a council, but under the Highways Act, to make any junction onto an adopted highway, they have to have that legal agreement. So highways, separate from this planning permission, highways would have agreement over those exact works, including things like moving the 30-mile-an-hour zone and anything else, whether it's more like a physical constraint to slow traffic or some of the kind of optical type illusions where there's different painting techniques used to make it look like the road's perhaps narrower than it really is, that makes you slow down. So we could cover that in the minutes, Chair, and that could be incorporated into Section 278 agreements, and I'll make a point of speaking to our highways colleagues about that separately.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Higginson, then Councillor Anwar.
The other point I wanted to make is you look at any part of the B4245, and there are T-junctions where on that road where there are a vast number of houses or traffic coming onto it from many developments. So, I thought about this while the debate is going on, and if you look at the Manor Chase in Andy, there's a huge number of houses there. It's coming on the T-junction, but you've got the refuge ways, the traffic islands, if I put it that way, there. So I don't think, looking at it logically, I think it can be managed without a roundabout. But I appreciate the comments to be made.
Thank you, Councillor Anwar.
I think, Chairman, we need to agree the additional conditions and amendment as well, noted in the minutes, please.
Thank you. Okay.
From the late correspondence, yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Dimmock, do you wish to have 2 minutes to sum up?
No, no comment, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blakeborough?
It's just a quickie, really, just in terms of if we decide not to go for the roundabout. I don't travel that road, so I don't know what the extent of the problem is. So I have to listen to the member, obviously, who does know their area. I guess it's just to hopefully that there's some sort of commitment for highways to work closely with the members to put a management programme, a speed management programme there, because obviously it is dangerous, there is an issue, so just to have some commitment that they will work closely with the members to put something in place there to tackle that issue, really.
Thank you very much. Any more comments?
Sorry.
Right. Councillor,
I do apologise. I would just like it on record, though, there is a 30-mile-an-hour limit through Undy Omega, and there's still a problem, so you can develop it past that development, but there will still be a problem. There does need further traffic calming measures put in place, or to be reviewed anyway.
Right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Chair, do you want me just to reassure Councillor Dimmock, I'll pass that on to highways colleagues to make sure they're aware.
Thank you for that, Mark. Anybody wish to move now the application? Councillor Murphy.
Yes, I move the application for approval.
Right, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Powell. Could I have a show of hands for approval, please? Right, thank you. I'd like to draw attention to the fact that Councillor Val Smith is in here today, as he's got an application in your ward. You've been sat there very patiently. I wonder if you wanted us to consider it next, as it more or less...
I'm very happy listening to your debate.
Right, okay, thank you. I thought we could have moved it up the agenda.
No, I'm very happy.
Right, thank you. Go on to St Thomas's, no, the Hereford Road in Monmouth, page 89. That is 01478, and this is for an application for the construction of a bungalow in a rear garden. Thank
you. Didn't come on there. Sorry. This application seeks consent for the demolition of a garage at 78 Hereford Road and the construction of a bungalow in the rear garden. The application has been presented to the Planning Committee at the request of the delegated panel. So we have a look at the photographs there. That's the property in question, 78 Hereford Road. The attached garage there is proposed to be demolished to provide access to the rear garden. Yeah, so that is the long rear garden at the back of 78. Then the next photograph, that shows a look towards the north, is it? The 80, across the garden to number 80. And the property that you can see in the distance there is a bungalow at 7 the Rickfield. And this proposed dwelling would be in line with that property there. The next photograph, that shows the garden, which would look into number 74, which is adjacent the other side. Go to the next photo, Phil. That is the common boundary between 74 and 78. Number 74 is there on the left, 78 is the application site. Okay, and then that is looking at number 80 Hereford Road, that's the adjacent property, which looks down into the garden. And that is a photograph of the front garden of number 78. Okay. Right, the application is in outline with all matters reserved except for the access. Illustrative plans have been provided to demonstrate how the proposed bungalow would sit on the plot, which is that illustration there. The proposed dwelling would be single-storey with a maximum height of 4.55 metres, a width of 10.6 metres and depth of 10.6. A new driveway would run alongside the existing dwelling, adjacent to the common boundary with number 80 Hereford Road, with a parking area to the front of both the existing dwelling and the proposed bungalow. The site is within the development boundary and is therefore acceptable in principle, subject to detailed planning considerations. The main issues in this case are neighbour amenity, visual amenity and access. With regard to the neighbour amenity, the proposed dwelling would be single-storey and set at a lower level than the existing properties on Hereford Road. The illustrative plan shows that the bungalow can be located to achieve satisfactory separating distances between the properties. That is 27 metres between the bungalow and the host dwelling and over 30 metres to the neighbouring dwellings. As the proposed dwelling is single-storey, there's little opportunity for overlooking, as views into neighbouring gardens can be screened with boundary materials and habitable windows can be conditioned and limited to the west and eastern elevations. Appropriate landscaping would provide noise mitigation and soften the development into the landscape. The illustrative driveway along the common boundary can be conditioned to provide a double buffer of fencing and landscaping, which ensures that the driveway is 2 metres from the boundary to minimise the impact of vehicles using this drive. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable in terms of residential amenity. The proposed dwelling will only be partly visible from Hereford Road, as it is set behind the existing dwellings and at a lower level, as well as being single-storey. It's therefore considered that the proposal will not be harmful to visual amenity. There's no highway objection to the proposal, as it would improve the situation at number 78, and there is room to provide 3 parking spaces for the bungalow, which would meet highway requirements. A viability assessment has been undertaken and a financial contribution has been calculated and agreed in relation to the provision of affordable housing under Policy H4. Therefore, officers recommend approval of this application, subject to a Section 106 agreement to secure this contribution, and also the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed for that, Paula. I do believe it's in Councillor Feakin's ward, but before he became a member of the County Council, I understand, and on the Planning Committee, he discussed it when he was a member of Town Council. So due to that, he has declared interest and left the chamber. So I don't know who the adjoining ward would be to that. Nobody, I don't think, that's actually on the committee. So most of us were there yesterday, so I'll take comments from anyone in the committee. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's visible. I stand corrected. I've got considerable sympathy for the neighbours here, and I think if I was them, I wouldn't want this application to go ahead at all. Having said that, I'm trying to find planning reasons that would stand up to or stand up against the view of an inspector if it went to appeal. And I know we shouldn't think like that, but sometimes you have to if you can't see the way forward. So on the basis of that, I would reluctantly have to vote for approval, but I wouldn't be comfortable with it.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Harris and Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There have been hundreds of these types of development that have come forward over the years that I've been on the planning committee, and this is one of the largest plots that I've seen, the so-called garden grabbing, for want of a better word, actually come forward. And it is sad, and I think it's sad no matter where it is. A house is built with a garden and it's lovely, and then somebody comes along and says, I want another house in there, and the neighbours either side are going to get totally upset, and quite understandably. But unfortunately, as Councillor Murphy has said, it complies, this application complies with all the constrictions that we put on and want to see taken into account. And I, again, think we have no option but to grant this approval. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was looking at the start of this agenda where it discusses policy DES1, which is general design considerations. And I think there are some points within that which would help direct the committee, particularly those who sympathise with the neighbours to this property. It talks about basically about ensuring that it contributes towards a sense of place, whilst ensuring that the amount of development and its intensity is compatible with existing uses, respect the existing form, scale, siting, massing, materials and layout of its setting and any neighbouring quality buildings, maintain reasonable levels of privacy and amenity of occupiers of neighbouring properties where applicable, respect built on natural views and panoramas where they include historical features. Well, obviously there isn't a historical feature here, but there is obviously a very nice view at the back. I mean, effectively what I'm trying to highlight is that aspects of that particular policy, we are talking about a neighbourhood where there is normally just one house and a back garden, and obviously this isn't the case here, because there'll be at the back garden there'll be cars going by, and cars basically adjacent to a neighbour's more or less allotment plot, and obviously that will have an influence on how the property is used by neighbouring properties in terms of their garden amenity. The other thing that I was looking at is, if I can actually find it, is there's a Wellbeing Act, and it talks about maintaining physical and mental health. And I think that part of gardening, in a sense, is maintaining that physical and mental health, in terms of it being, I've just found it here, it says Wellbeing of Future Generations, Wales Act 2015, and it mentions a healthier Wales, people's physical and mental well-being is maximised and health impacts are understood. I think people don't realise what the health impacts actually of sitting out and relaxing in your back garden actually are. And I think this is an important factor to consider. So I think there are one or two areas that this committee could look at in terms of the policies that I've seen mentioned here, which I don't think have been fully discussed in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Blakeborough?
Actually, Councillor Brown has highlighted some of the issues I was looking at, and thank you for that, because you linked it directly to legislation, because there is a balancing act going on here. First of all, my gut reaction is no way. I just think, you know, it just has this sense of overdevelopment, taking over a garden, and but that's my heart. So I have to then go to policy, because it's got to be dealt through legislation policy. It's got to be the head. On the one side, the policy is saying it's a brown site, so there's no reason why it can't be built there. It's within the LDP, no reason it can't be put there. On the other side, as you've highlighted, we have to take into account of ensuring the health and well-being of neighbours, and also their right to peace and quiet and their amenities. And it's right, if you're working in a garden and relaxing in the garden, you will be affected by noise, by light, because it's not just the house there, but it's all the activity around the house. And I think that will have a detrimental impact on the neighbours. We're not looking at a massive development like the 266, I know. It's one development, but there's two neighbours that are going to be severely affected by this. For me, it's that balancing of the two policies, and I'm just tipping towards the say no to the development. It's a really difficult one. I just also want to just ask a question, because on the local development plan policies, it's got affordable housing provision. Is that just there? It's not affordable housing, is it? Or?
Yeah, Chair, we have supplementary planning guidance adopted now, which require an off-site contribution. So, I mean, obviously we can have 35% of this new dwelling as affordable. So instead on these single plot schemes, if it's not a self-build scheme, then they'd have to provide a contribution that we'll pull together and spend elsewhere.
Okay. Councillor Harris, and very often you get what they call a two-bedroom bungalow. This is 3 on a small plot adjoining as an annex for perhaps an elderly or dependent relative will very often occupy, and then there isn't quite so many cars or whatever contributed to that. Quickly, Councillor.
Yeah, just ask the question. This is a separate house that would be sold separately. It's not part of one plot with a condition that it can only be sold as one plot. It is separate, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so you or I could buy it and move in completely separate to the occupiers of the main house. Chair, just in response to a couple of those points, because there's some interesting ones come out there. It is about the policy balance, and if we were looking at a much smaller site where there wasn't enough amenity space either for the new home and those occupiers or the existing one retained, or if they were going 2-storey and they were overlooking issues on the neighbours, then yeah, we'd be coming to a different recommendation. Or if there were more than one dwelling, and you'd have a far more intense use of that driveway down the side, I dare say we'd be coming to a different recommendation. But on this scale, our recommendation as officers is that it is acceptable. There will be some impact on the neighbours, there's no denying that, where currently they have pretty much nothing going on at the back of next door's house apart from gardening, or potentially kids playing football or something if a different family moved in. There would be a difference in use, but we have to look at whether that difference, that harm caused, is significantly detrimental to their amenities. It is a fine balance, but our recommendation is it wouldn't be. And I guess part of that assessment also looks at the neighbours, the scope of their plots, and that relationship. We're also a bit mindful of the bit to the north of this plan where it is a different format because there's a proper road in rather than driveways down the side, but there is that extensive development on the back. The well-being one is a really interesting question. It's all a bit novel, I guess, if we're honest, because it is a new bit of legislation we're grappling with. and it's very difficult to weigh up all those competing objectives, because if you go too far in a certain direction, you build nothing anywhere, or go too far the other way, then you're pretty much ignoring what the Act says. So, yeah, we heard really eloquently and clearly from both neighbours the concerns they have of the impact, and I can sympathise with them, but I think the level of the impact and the scope for them to continue enjoying their amenities would, in our recommendation, tip the balance in favour of saying yes. It isn't something that's been tested at appeal yet in terms of the Wellbeing Act, to my knowledge. And it's the kind of thing that we'd all share as chief planning officers in Wales of when the first one comes up. So yeah, similar to your balancing act, my gut feeling is in the opposite direction to yours. But the considerations you're giving it are the right ones. As Councillor Murphy mentioned, how would we fare at appeal? I genuinely can't see us winning this argument at appeal. And I'm not saying that's our decisive conclusion in that sense, but we'd have to be mindful of, if a third party is looking at this, how would they assess it? As a bit of a sanity check of our own decision making. And if we don't think we'd win, then chances are that the right decision is to approve it. So that's our advice as officers. You saw the site yesterday. You've raised the right points now. It is that balanced judgment.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Harris and Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I've said, over the years we've looked at, on the Planning Committee, hundreds of this sort of application. And many's the time I've said we really ought, as a Planning Committee, to sit down and look at size of plots, size of the houses that are bungalows that are going to be put on those plots, to get some sort of criteria, if you like, about what we consider to be acceptable and unacceptable. We've never done it. And we're in a situation here where I've already mentioned that this is one of the biggest plots with this sort of thing that we've seen in many a time. And as I've already mentioned, in any situation like this, neighbours either side are not going to be happy by definition. Nobody would under the circumstances. And if we're going to take that as a criterion, then we're in a happy position of saying whatever comes up as a planning application for an additional building in a garden, we will not grant planning permission. So we've got to grasp the nettle and say, are we going to do that, or are we going to have this sort of dilemma every time one of these applications come before us? And that's where we are. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dovey?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's a touch of the wisdom of Job here, really, isn't it? I've sort of swayed before both views. The thing that I think is different here, I think the well-being thing is the key factor. I think what you're doing here, you're not putting a summer house or anything else down there. What you are introducing is another home with all the activities that go with that. And because of the nature of the size of the plot, you are stretching the area over which that new home will have an impact. Not only in terms of its visibility, but also in terms of its activities and everything that goes with the home. If you want, the resident that goes in there now might be absolutely fine, but times change, and you get another resident in the same place, and it might create hell on wheels. And that is perhaps because we've taken this decision now. This is, in many ways, a quite unique plot. It is quite large. It is in an area where everybody within that area has conformed to a certain pattern. And this one is breaking, if you like, that pattern. And I think this one has some unique features. Those are the unique features about it. If you think of the infilling that you see going on in other areas up in the southeast where we used to live, it's what happened there in many instances on places where they had big gardens like that. The impact was really quite negative, and in most cases the issue was the person who wanted to do that wanted to sell the house they lived in as well, so they were capitalizing. That makes it really difficult here. I think this one is different, and I think I am against the planning approval for this dwelling. I think it has a greater impact, and it impacts on more people, and I think it could change the nature of the area. And I think I'm against it.
Thank you, Councillor Colby. Mark wishes to comment now before I take Councillor Brown.
Sorry, Chair, it's probably useful if I just ask the question and go to Councillor Brown. We've very, very recently had an appeal decision through on a backland development case in Llangibby. So while you're continuing the discussion, do you want us to bring up the plan? The appeal's been allowed, but we can give you a very recent example. It's so new it hasn't made it to the agenda to present back to you, but it is one worth bearing in mind.
Yes, I mean, I obviously did, coming back on the previous comments that I've made, I mean, it was almost as if, sorry, I'm not sure of the councillor's name in the front.
Roger, just say Roger.
Yeah, for Roger's comment about, you know, if we take account of every neighbourhood's view, then effectively we won't grant anything anywhere. Now, I think actually there are more rational reasons actually set out in policy DES1, because it does say respect, this is part C of it, respect the existing form, scale, siting, massing materials and layout of its setting and any neighbouring quality buildings. Now, if you look at the neighbourhood buildings on either side, they are single dwellings with a garden at the back. This is not going to be a single dwelling with a garden at the back. So does it respect those things? No, it doesn't. And I think that's the thing that we need to grasp. I appreciate this may be a difficult decision in terms of what's gone on before in terms of appeals and so forth. But I mean, although the bungalow will be designed so that the windows aren't directly next to the boundaries of the property, if you do happen to get somebody living there who's very noisy and opens their windows and has music playing virtually all the time, it means that the privacy and the amenity of the neighbours who are enjoying their garden is drastically affected. And I think there are actually logical reasons to reject this and rational reasons. Thank you.
Chair, these are the plans for the scheme in Llangibby. I'm just looking through for the details behind it, but this appeal was recently allowed. Is one of Andrew's applications, so if you're happy, Chair, it might be easier for Andrew to take us through it. We've got the existing property at the front, and then this bungalow proposed at the back. So it looks to me like it's not too dissimilar in the fact there's a bungalow at a slightly lower level than the original house at the front. But on a smaller garden. So, Chair, are you happy if Andrew just talks us through it briefly?
Thank you, Andrew.
That's fine. It's next to the village hall. As you turn up Ton Road.
I understood that was turned down.
It was. We refused the application.
Well, yes, the point we're trying to make.
Yeah.
It's what we're all making.
Yeah, Chair, but we lost the appeal. So the arguments that we tried to make weren't held up by the inspector.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we must. We've discussed this long and hard now.
Yeah, yes, very quickly. The point is that
which was to influence the panel in the respective litigation. And that wasn't on the agenda, and neither does it form any relevance to this case. This case is an individual case, and that was a very belligerent, misleading act to try and influence this panel.
No, I'm sorry, Chair. No, I'm sorry. I take exception to that.
Hence I seek to speak, because that was not on the agenda.
No, it's a policy I'm talking about.
Councillor Harris, then Councillor Dovey, then Councillor Higginson. Councillor Evans now. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Judge. Didn't see your hand at the back. Thank you.
Is it me, Manager? Yeah, I think it's important that we actually, as a planning committee, spend some time on separate site visits, going around the county, looking at examples of what we've done and what we've not been allowed to do. And then the new members will get an idea of what we're actually talking about. So we want both sorts, ones of which we've lost on appeal, ones of we've gained on appeal, and those general ones that we've allowed. Because I'm tired of having this sort of discussion every time we have this sort of application coming up. We need to get our own criteria and know what it is and stick to it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dovey, quickly, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think that was irrelevant, quite frankly. On a couple of bases, three things in my mind. That was close to a village hall, so everybody in an established area of high activity. So it's in a different ambience. The buildings were close together because it wasn't such a big plot. And so it didn't have such a wide impact. Whereas this building, this new building here, is in an entirely different area. The area is entirely different. There's no external thing like a village hall to impact on other residents there. The new house could well be, I will say, could very well be the disturbing influence in that area. I think we are talking about chalk and cheese. And I think the points of being made by councillors here about well-being is a well-made point, and I think this is different, and what I've heard said up to now hasn't really shaken me. In fact, the last example that was put up as an example of what we've passed or what would be allowed has made it even clearer that is entirely different to what I've written down.
Thank you, Councillor Dovey. I'll have to move on.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Higginson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. We discuss each case on its merits. And that's it. And I appreciate the efforts that the officers put into this. Every decision they come to is in accordance with the policy of one of the policies this council has. And okay, I appreciate there's an emotional aspect to this as well sometimes, but with respect, you've got to put the emotional element one side and base it on actual facts.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Jez at the back.
Councillor Jez, I like that. I wish it were an emotional issue, Madam Chair, but of course it's not, and we have to work within a legal framework. And regardless of whether the example gave us any extra information. I think you have to look at the details of the proposal, and the only legal roadblock for us would come from the DES or the Wellbeing Act, and I don't think that those objections are actually in the spirit of that Act. We would be trying to use the letter of that Act to block the proposal, and so I think it would probably fail at appeal, in which case, unfortunately, I don't see that we've got much recourse other than to approve it.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody wish to move now? I think we have definitely discussed this application long enough. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'd like to move a refusal of the application on the grounds of policy DES1 and the wellbeing and sorry, I can't find it now. The Wellbeing of Future Generation Wales Act 2015, in particular, a healthier Wales. I would hope that the officers might assist in relation to the wording of this proposal to reject and the particular aspects of policy DES1 that need to be put forward. So I'm hoping the officers will give me a goodly, well-worded recommendation. Thank you.
Chair, do you want me just to clarify on the procedure for that? So if committee is minded to go against the officer recommendation, then what we'd do is we'd bring it back to the next meeting with some wording. So we'd certainly put some wording together to support the reason for refusal, but it is down to committee to identify what exactly the issues are. So you need to agree that at this stage before you have the vote. But we will put the meat on the bones. It will come back to the next meeting with that exact wording.
You proposed a move to refuse the application. Do you have a seconder, Councillor Brown? Could I have a show of hands for a refusal of the application, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for refusal, Chair. For approval, so the application is approved, Chairman, by 8 votes to 5.
Right, thank you very much indeed for that, Rob. Yes. Right. Okay, thank you, everybody. We go now to page 99 to 104, application 000164, and that's at Thomas's Square in Monmouth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot to click over there by any chance. Oh. Cheers, thank you. Hello, this is application 2017-00164. Plan committee members went on site yesterday. It is a site directly behind the Green Dragon pub in St Thomas's Square in Monmouth. This is the site. This is actually standing just outside the site from the road, looking in. Those metal gates were put up. There's a barn next to it, and there's some residential apartments to the rear. This is the site in red, directly behind the Green Dragon pub. We were there yesterday, standing on the road adjacent to Goldwire Lane. It was boarded up yesterday because they're hoping to start construction soon. And it is surrounded by generally residential properties and businesses. This is a closer site plan. And then this is the proposal. So the proposed development on the site, it's a renewal application, an old application which the planning committee approved approximately 5 years ago. So this application's come in to extend the time period in which they can implement that consent. The application is for 8 ensuite bedrooms for holiday accommodation to extend and to facilitate supplementary income for the pub, which needs that in terms of viable commercial entity. So they want that to generate that tourism in the area. The building itself would be 3 stories high. This is the building that we're talking about. It's 11.1 metres by 14.3 metres in footprint. It's 5.3 metres to the eaves and 8.4 metres to the ridge, and have a pitch roof. The building itself would be constructed with facing brickwork to match other buildings in the area. There was an old granary building to the side of it, so hopefully we're going to match up with that. And it would be slate for the roof with UPVC openings. From the plan, if you have a look, the arrangement of the accommodation is all on the upper levels, so the first and second floor level. The ground floor would be for garaging at the bottom, and for laundry rooms, storeroom and a boiler room. So there'd be no living accommodation on the ground floor at all. The site is quite sensitive. It lies within a conservation area, a Monmouth conservation area, and it also lies within a flood zone C1, which is the defended flood zone. However, this is the reason why the application is being presented to committee today, because we have an objection from Natural Resources Wales in relation to the flood consequence assessment that's been done for the site. They believe that the site the site would flood up to 113 centimetres in the year 1 to 100 plus climate change data, so it would flood in those instances. However, on balance, as officers, we consider that given the fact that the ground floor wouldn't be used for living accommodation, and that they would be safe refuge on the upper floors, and given the neighbouring uses in terms of residential and the neighbouring businesses, that on balance that would be acceptable, and the development would accord with policy SD3 of the LDP, given that it would be an extension of an existing use of the site in terms of recreational and leisure. So on balance, we do feel that the development is acceptable in flood risks, and that was the decision that was taken by the Planning Committee 5 years ago. And given that there's been no significant change in policy to date, and we feel that that is still the same recommendation to Planning Committee members, that the flood risk is acceptable, and there would be no significant harm to anyone who uses this site. There would be a flood evacuation plan in place, and also, as I said, the accommodation would be on the upper levels. Therefore, we consider the application acceptable, and we are recommending approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report, which are the same conditions that were outlined on the previous consent. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Craig. Most of the members were there and witnessed it yesterday. I don't think it needs a great deal of discussion, as there's no residential use. Councillor Murphy?
I'm quite happy with the presentation that Craig's given us, and move it for approval, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you ever so much for your patience, Councillor Smith. This is the last one on the agenda today, and this is at Glasgoyd Pub, Monkswood, 00401, and this is for disposal and replacement pre-existing timber structure. But I believe it's already been replaced, hasn't it, Phil? So it's retrospective, really.
That's right, yeah. There's another one we looked at yesterday, and the timber building's already in situ. Just quickly run through the slides. That's the Glasgoyd Club. You can't see the site of the new pavilion, if I can call it that, which is behind the trees and behind the building. That's looking back the A472, and the site's on your left. So there's the structure in place. We saw it yesterday. It's to accommodate changing facilities for wider use of the recreational pitches that are already there. I think the applicant's going to actually do some works to help drain the pitches properly, so they can be put to better use, and to have things like mini rugby tournaments for local clubs in the area to use, possibly second team pitch for Goitra, who knows what they could be put to, and that will help help the change in facilities. And that's where it is in the area edge blue there, which we saw yesterday, and it shows the wider area where the sports pitches are alongside the building. And we would recommend approval. It fits into the general recreational use of the wider area. It's ancillary to the club cum pub building, and the existing access is in place, and there's a large parking area that can be used in association with it as well. So we would recommend approval. There's no camping as originally stated on the description, and that's been omitted. That will be omitted in any decision if it is approved today.
Thank you very much, Phil. Do you wish to comment at all, Councillor Smith?
Typo.
There was considerable concern with the camping proposal, so that has now been omitted. He can still use it for 28 days under the permitted development. So, no, I was concerned with the camping because I have great concerns, as you know, with the road, the speed of the traffic, the volume. So, yeah, fine with the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Higginson?
I'm prepared to move approval, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Harris seconds it. Everybody in agreement? Could I have a show of hands, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, I didn't get my hand up quickly enough. I'm not against it. I'm not against it. But what I did want to say is, I really get very tired of the numbers of retro permissions we give, and I think it is something that there is too much happening within the county. I think retrospective planning decisions are getting a bit too easy. People think they can get away with them, I think.
Thank you. I do hope you realise that we're still live streaming, so I'd like to state that is the end of the meeting and decisions have been made today, and thank you all for your attendance.
I accept the decision.
Thank
It's
you.
the principle that I'm after.
We have got appeals to do that on the last item on the agenda, but that isn't decisions that we make now, but Mark will comment. Thank you. Paul is going to do it. Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Paula, because I believe... Councillor Clark?
Just on this one, our objection was traffic. If you read that inspector's report, it goes there in the middle of the day when everybody has left us and gone to work, and all the streets are clear of traffic. If he'd gone there at night time, there wouldn't have been a car park space outside there. I mean, it makes a nonsense of this inspectorate if they don't put relevant checks on what they're saying and doing.
To be fair, he did rely on the survey that the applicant had done, which no, but there was evidence before him that the traffic wasn't a problem even in the evening.
Thank you. Anything else now?
No, Chair, only briefly to mention, I got handouts from the training last week, which I'll give to you just before you go. I would have emailed it, but the presentation's huge and the lights would have dimmed. Thanks.
Right.